Well, guys, let's do this. So, Megan Chiarello and Andy Neary, welcome to the podcast, guys. Thanks for coming on.
You bet.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. It's funny. We both looked at each other. This is the movie magic, right? So, this is the first podcast and the only podcast so far that will have multiple guests. Those that are watching at home obviously will notice Andy is in his home and Megan is here with me. So we're working out the slight logistical kinks, but that's what makes this fun because this is almost a trial and error type deal. Yeah. So first and foremost, thank you both for coming back. Megan, obviously you traveled in from Florida, so very, very appreciative of that. Everything okay coming in for you and nice and easy peasy?
Oh yeah, and I love coming to Dallas. The city it's special, it's different, so I'm happy to be here.
I'm not getting you to come to I don't want to disparage any place, but rural Idaho, right? I'm
exactly.
Not getting, okay.
Yeah, that I would zoom in for.
No, I'm sure it's beautiful. And then Andy, I know obviously, I guess we can go ahead and talk about this real quick. You were supposed to be here, but obviously the weather had other plans. So were we getting the snow, the wind, all of the above? What was happening?
Mountains are getting the snow, but down here yesterday we had extremely high winds. It was actually the first time in Colorado history that the Front Range was labeled a critical fire danger in the month of December. Lamar, Colorado, a small town out on the east part of the Eastern Plains, clocked wind speeds at 107 yesterday.
107, just not a tornado, just literally blowing winds of 107.
Sunny out. Imagine it being sunny out with 107 mile an hour winds.
What would your fastball have been if you had that at your back? 200 miles an hour?
Yeah, I wouldn't have been in insurance.
As long as you could control that, I don't think your catcher would even be able to catch it. But anyway, so. Guys, this is going to be fun, right? I want to lay out real quick, if you'll give me 2 seconds, just lay out the intent of today because we want to recap 2021. This is also, unfortunately, bad news. This is the very last podcast that will be recorded in this studio. Mm-hmm. This building was purchased, and the studio is no mas. So I'm going to have to figure out the next version of this, and there's some things in the works that I think I'll be excited to announce at some point. But this is the last podcast ever, for at least for me, recorded in the studio. So I thought, let's go out with a bang. Let's have a recap of kind of some previous guests, some favorite guests of mine, as well as ones that I think can bring something really interesting to the table, which is marketing and healthcare, social media strategy, content creation, you name it. And so the goal for today would be talking broker marketing strategies for 2022 with some of the best and brightest people I know to have this conversation. And so I wanted to welcome you two back on to share in that discussion. So thank you again for joining. You guys have both been on the podcast before. So Megan, if you real quick, we don't need to go into deep detail about your background again. You were episode 17 for anybody that wants to go back and listen to Megan's individual podcast. But real briefly, could you tell us your background and who you are again for the audience?
Yes, I am the Vice President of Marketing for WellNet Healthcare. I have been in this space over 10 years, which I think is a lot for someone my age. We talked about this on the podcast last time. We're trying to get younger talent in, so I love what I do. I'm passionate about marketing. I also was in the Ben admin space for a while, so I know a lot about enrollment, employee engagement, and I love to write, and I love coffee.
You love coffee. How is the cold brew, by the way?
It is very good.
So you went with the non-nitro, though, right? Just the kind of regular cold brew?
Yeah, because I didn't want to be like too... Hi.
Well, I can't imagine you over-caffeinated. Maybe that's not a good thing. I'm with you, though. This is probably coffee number 4, I hate to admit.
Oh, yeah.
Andy, what about yourself? Real quick, I want you to just get a chance to introduce yourself, who you are, what you do, so the people listening in have some background.
Yeah, well, first, I'm sorry to hear that the building got bought, because if anybody hasn't been to Spencer's workplace there at Venture X, that thing's kick ass, man. Yeah. I mean, the coffee, the kitchen, the glass, everything. It's an awesome place. Yeah. My background, been in the insurance industry almost 20 years, most of it as a benefit advisor, and built a business a couple of years ago, realizing there was a huge gap in the industry, Spencer, and that was, Megan mentioned, young talent. People don't know how to train people in this industry. And, when most of us got in the industry, we were given a phone book and told to go smile and dial and go get them, kid. Yeah. And so I'm hell bent with the business, the Complete Game Consulting, to help advisors and agencies build a brand message that actually attracts the right prospects. And so it's helping train people to really build a prospecting machine that our industry is lacking today.
Yeah. Well, and you're doing a great job, and both of you are obviously. The fact that I wanted to have you guys on a repeat guest, I hope that obviously speaks to the way that I feel about both of what you're doing. Separate spaces, right? Complementary spaces possibly, but you guys all have both carved out your own individual niches, and kudos to both of you for being standouts and obvious standouts in the space. Megan, let's start with you. You have a unique strategy. I was sharing off the podcast. I'll share it with you on the podcast. I'm a big fan of who you are and what you bring to the table, like the authenticity of when you post. You take an advantage I've seen of LinkedIn stories where you're capturing, hey, I'm at such and such expo and so good to see people. I think you've mastered the ability to personally brand yourself, but of course you're doing it on behalf of WellNet and you're, VP of marketing there for the overall branding strategy. I'd like to start, if you don't mind, what made you decide to start leveraging social media and content creation in general? How did you what was the genesis of that for you?
Yeah, I don't know our industry and a professional world without LinkedIn. So coming into the space when I did, LinkedIn was starting to become interesting, and people were taking notice. And what they were doing was taking what LinkedIn was initially designed for recruitment, and people started realizing, we can prospect on here. We can be flies on the wall and look at what our prospects are posting and what they like. And so this concept of social selling came about. So I immediately...
Were you posting on other socials beforehand? I mean, were you very comfortable with Instagrams and Facebooks and things like that before?
Yeah. I think social media was so different back then too.
What time frame? So you keep saying back then. So, I know you're not that old.
I know,
was that like 2 years ago?
Yeah. No, I'm not that young. So I started in this space 2011.
Okay.
Yeah. So different social media time. The progression over the last 10 years in social is like nothing I probably would have thought. But yeah, I mean, I enjoyed social media, but when I realized that I could leverage it for myself, but also for my company and helping the sales marketing alignment that I talk a lot about, for me, it was just innate. Okay. Like, how could you not be doing this?
Well, I appreciate you having that openness, and I definitely want Andy to weigh on this as well. But like, some people are so terrified of the notion of being public, especially within the context of their jobs.
Yeah.
So the fact that you gravitated towards it and you were just automatically open to it, I mean, I think it comes across in the way that you post, and I genuinely mean that. There's no reservation that comes through, and everything you post is completely you and completely authentic. And so I'm glad you gravitated so quickly to it. And again, it's made you where it's noticeable in a marketplace where we're all competing for attention, as you say a lot, Andy. You're doing a great job of standing out. How about you, Andy? Because I want to go back and forth, but I do want to give you kind of the similar question, the origins for you, right? Because you talk about your story of going to Colorado and needing to find a new way to really position yourself and start over. So was it immediate that LinkedIn was a space for you, or what was the figuring out process like for you?
Yeah, great question. What's interesting is I actually don't like social media, but it's necessary, right? And if you want to grow your business. And my story really started in 2014. Going back to when Amy and I decided to move to Colorado. I was with an insurance agency here in Colorado that, I'm in a market selling now where nobody knows who I am, right? And so I had to make it a point to try to get as many people to know me as quickly as I could. So I had two choices. I could do it one phone call at a time, which is going to be long, frustrating, and arduous, or I could go after what I refer to today as exponential awareness. I realized on LinkedIn, one post could get 10, 100, maybe even 1,000 plus people to see it at once. And so I started creating content back in 14, 15. I started just writing articles. That's really all I did. And then I started finding the power, realizing the power of video and storytelling and all that stuff that now you see out there. What I realized, Spencer, and I think you're really hitting it with Megan too, is consistency. The audience on social media recognizes consistency. And if you just continuously show up day in and day out, people will start taking notice. And that's when the brand starts getting established. And for the folks out there, that are deathly afraid to put themselves out there, the reason I say it's a must today is our industry, we all know this, the market's too noisy, right? I don't care even if you're in a rural market. Unless you're building a business today, 100% off referrals. And if you are, kudos, stay right there. For the rest of us, we've got to grab the attention of our prospects. They've got to see us. And if they can't see us, they can't buy from us. And so that's why I think social media is so powerful.
So was it the same as Megan though? Like Megan's already using other social tools, and so it was really easy for her to transition, or was it a learning curve for you to start using LinkedIn in that way?
Absolute learning curve, because I don't even know if I had a Facebook account yet. I definitely was not on Instagram. LinkedIn was my first platform. So yeah, it was definitely a learning curve.
Okay. And how, Megan, how is it kind of more for you? Did you start video immediately? Were you doing text form like Andy doing articles, or were you doing company curated posts? What was the origins for you to start?
Yeah, the origins was consistent social posts.
Okay.
So, and a lot of it for me was resharing, but adjusting the way I posted versus what the company posted. And so that's a big part of what I want to talk about today too, is the interweaving of content from your personal brand to the company page. So that is how I started. I would post for my company and then I would share it. So not only was I giving my personal opinion to why I thought the company post was interesting, but then I was also exposing that post to my network and giving the brand recognition.
Yeah.
So for me, that was what I started. It was coming up with graphics, which I still do. We definitely elevate it. And then as video became more popular, it's still very hard, I think, for brands to create video because you need a face of the brand. And so that's where it's very different when you talk about building a personal brand for your own prospecting and then like also the company brand too, which true. I think that's kind of where the discussion gets a little dicey for advisors and where they get kind of overwhelmed in just starting or consistently posting.
Fair enough. Yeah, Andy, you want to weigh on that? Because I think you probably have some.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think what Megan said was spot on because I do believe, I remember Seth Denson said this to me once and it just stuck. Humans buy from humans. They don't buy from logos on business cards. And agencies need to recognize that they're actually renting the brand of their producers. The producers aren't renting their logo. And so to Megan's point, yeah, there's going to be a company page where you're posting company information, but when it comes to your own LinkedIn content, they want to see you. Mm-hmm.
Well, that's
yeah, absolutely. And there's a way to interact the two together, as Megan referenced, to make sure that there's no one competing with the other. There's a way to do it that's very synonymous.
Well, and I was going to weigh in. I apologize for stepping on your toes for a second, but I was going to weigh in on that. I feel like having come from some large organizations that did position themselves as brand first, and really the individuals that work for them were kind of behind the scenes almost. Even the sales reps were never public. So then I've seen the opposite end of the spectrum and how like some of that is a lower level of engagement on the social media because people, like you said, aren't interacting with a human that represents that brand. It's almost like this nameless, faceless organization, and there's nothing wrong with that. But then there's not a human connection sometimes that goes along with, oh, here's a branded post about a marketing slick and stuff like that. So I've seen it, both dynamics play out. I think you position it kind of uniquely though, Megan. It's like how can you do both, right? How can you have a brand and curated content that's still engaging, have an individual like yourself help boost it, help expand and supplement some of the marketing materials? There is a way you can do both, and I think they both augment each other, right?
100%.
Okay, cool.
Oh, yeah.
But Andy, you have a different perspective because your brand is effectively you, right? I mean, you're not necessarily representing anybody else than the Andy brand, or am I mistaken in that regard?
Well, I think it's easier to do when you also own your own company, right? Like I'm a solopreneur in a way, so my personal brand and my company can really be one, right? Especially when you're in the coaching consulting space. But I think even, don't get me wrong, when I built my personal brand, started doing it 6-7 years ago, did the agencies I worked for and worked with have a little rub with it once in a while? Yeah, they did.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Because they saw what was happening, and I would say the biggest rub, Spencer, was it went against what we've always done in this industry. Mm-hmm. It was new.
Yeah.
And it's uncomfortable when it's new. Right, Megan?
Yeah.
But I realized it kind of comes back to a statistic I heard recently. 77% of the millennials out there, and guys, I don't care what market you're in, they're going to be the vast majority of your buyers in the next 5 years.
Yeah.
They want a brand behind every company. They want a personal brand. Even if you're an accountant or an attorney, they want a personal brand.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. And I want to add,
Please,
why companies have a rub with it. Like I know I work with One Digital producers and other independent agencies, but we also work with brokerage houses too, because there's this feeling that you can't measure it.
Okay.
And ROI, and it's a waste of time. And there is a stigma that if you're on social media all day, you're not working and you're not selling.
Yeah.
So I think Andy and I can totally debunk that. And I actually have some stats to share.
I was gonna say you got some metrics that you can bust out.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
But it's measuring.
Yeah.
That I think is why people get so overwhelmed and then also resistant.
Yeah.
That's it right there. And I want to add to that quickly.
Yeah, please.
I work with an advisor right now, and her team, her agency, her company she's with, has set a $500,000 goal for her next year. That's lofty, right? Mm-hmm. The only strategy they gave her to hit it is to track her sales, her cold calling.
Okay.
Yeah.
To Megan's point, why? Because I can track it.
Yeah.
When she proposed her idea, what she's going to do with social media, her podcast, her webinars, you name it, they were like, why would you do that?
Oh my God.
If we could get more agencies to recognize effective time on LinkedIn is just as effective prospecting as picking up the phone, we'd have more advisors winning.
Well, and that's so effective time on LinkedIn is not just scrolling by. It's not just like mindlessly looking at content. It's commenting, posting yourself, liking things, resharing things, adding your commentary on other people's posts. It's an engaged level of participation and rather than passive. So I agree with you, Andy. May I ask though, because if we are going to debunk this notion of metrics or ROI, which I'm 100% on board, and I put together some of my own metrics as well.
Awesome.
What are you measuring? Like, how do you measure it, and how do you then articulate that these measurements do translate into business or visibility? Yeah,
I think tracking the lead generation from LinkedIn. So whatever CRM you use, or if you're tracking on a spreadsheet, you can, where did this contact come from? Okay. You can easily note it came from social. And that's what we started doing. So you add a custom field and you're essentially building a pipeline through your network. Yeah. So if you are connecting with qualified people, now you have a qualified list, and that's measurement in itself. I mean, you could be talking to leads all day, but if they're not qualified, and you can qualify them very quickly. You can go back and say, I generated qualified leads that resulted into an opportunity or resulted into at least a seat at the table. So you're saying have it a drop-down menu. How did you hear about us? LinkedIn is available, or social, or some sort. Yeah, like you as a sales rep, or you as a marketing department, you have to track that. Okay. Like you have to work with your salespeople to make sure whether you're uploading leads that you got from LinkedIn and then you note them as social, or you're manually doing it in your CRM. Okay. Yeah. Do you have any ways that you advocate for an ROI or measurable ROI? Because you can't manage what you can't measure, right, Andy? So how are you convincing folks that this
absolutely.
is useful?
I live in a world of analogies. So the way I look at LinkedIn is your network, whether that's 500 people or 10,000, that's your town, and you're the mayor of that town. So you get to pick and choose. You get to pick who lives in your town. Yeah. That's the qualified lead, right? Yeah. So if I build my town with the right people, AKA my prospects, I can measure that. Why? Because I can go right into my LinkedIn profile and see how many connections I have. Mm-hmm. I can see how many, in my world, how many are advisors. That's a metric. Yeah. And every time I post a piece of content, guess what? That's me putting up a new billboard in my town to try to influence my community members. It's a great analogy. Well, that's a metric I can measure. Yeah, I was going to say another one that LinkedIn really does well is analytics on posts, right? So not only views, but where are they being viewed? Who is what organization do they represent? So if you don't get a like from a specific person or a comment, I can go and look, and I'm not going to name names, but I can go look and see, 10 people from this organization have viewed my post. And that's a pretty, you also get the kind of the top 5. I see it's the same players over and over again. So I know where a lot of my audience is. And most of them, I think not all the top 5 are either a carrier or a broker partner that we either want to work with or do work with. So I think that's a very measurable way to say, yes, this is getting engagement with the right people. Yeah, and if you're observing that. Oh, go ahead, Megan. Go ahead. Sorry. I was going to. I was saying, and you're observing that. Now you have intel. Mm-hmm. So now you can take a step back when you're planning for your 2022 and say, okay, most of our engagement was in this market, or is from this type of
advisor or this type of person. Then you can start tailoring your content and tailoring your messages to speak to the people that you're attracting, and then also design content that would, that get the people that you're not attracting.
Yeah.
So you got to think big picture, and you have to get creative in taking these insights and making them work for you.
Well, because they're there. You just got to make them work. And what did you want to say, Andy? I'm sorry.
I think we're missing the biggest metric of all, though.
Friends.
Patience. And I know that's not a metric, but our industry is still so focused on short-term wins.
Oh, yes.
That's why we like the cold call. I cold call, I schedule meeting equals win. Mm-hmm. Patience is an underappreciated part of social media, but it's the best way to build a long-term sustained pipeline.
So in marketing,
and the one metric.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say the one metric another metric that I want to share. As long as you have the paid version of LinkedIn, which I think is a great investment, you get to see who comes to your profile, who's checking you out. So there's not an agency in this country that has a decent website that doesn't track how many hits they get to their website, right? Mm-hmm. Well, there's a metric in your LinkedIn profile that says who has looked at your profile. That's your personal website. Yeah. You get to track who is checking me out. And if it's a second connection, I'm sitting there going, well, they checked me out for a reason. Why don't I send them a message or a connection request? And more than not, that turns into a conversation. So the metrics are there. You just have to leverage the right ones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Andy says patience. Marketing, nurture. We call it nurturing. You're nurturing a prospect through a pipeline, and you're creating a marketing qualified lead. Yeah. It's not a sales qualified yet. So I actually just had a big review with my team, and excellent outcomes. But that term nurturing, for somebody that doesn't know it, they're like, what the hell does that mean? Mm-hmm. So it is training. It is patience. It is, we say this, it's the long game, and it really is. You have to get into that mindset when you're having a social strategy. You could still be intentional, but you could have quick wins, but it's not a quick hit.
Well, there are some quick wins that you can point at. There's immediate, I was able to attract that person on one post and we had a conversation and it turned into a sale. Those are great, right? But those also are not always those are maybe the outliers.
Right,
probably.
exactly.
So I'm with you, and I'm fortunate to be work for an organization that does understand the big picture, has allowed me to play this out in a long-term fashion. There are those immediate wins I can point to, but there are also those, hey, I've been posting this stuff for a year, had no idea this person was watching my stuff. Then I get a message out of the blue saying, thank you so much for the type of content you put out. This is great. Can we have a conversation about PlanSite?
Right.
I didn't even know that person maybe even existed prior to that conversation, but that's immediately a warm introduction. Whether or not they're qualified, I have to go through that process, of course. But it's like, how could you not say this is working if out of the blue, after a year of posting, somebody we really want to talk to has come to me based on the content that's being put out there, and then it ultimately leads to a benefit for PlanSite, not just myself. So I'm with you guys. It's that balance though, because you got to sell, you got to make money in the short term and the long term. So as long as you've got, I think, a balance of those types of prospects coming through the funnel, then you're doing a good job.
It's also for retention too. Yeah. So
true. Yeah.
So I will intentionally ping our clients and be like, hey, we just released this crawl, walk, run narrative playbook. Like, if you didn't get it, I want to make sure you have it. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times our clients will like it, or our clients will be like, thank you so much, or yeah, I read this. So it's giving you an opportunity to stay in front of the people that you want. It's an opportunity to talk to them every day.
Yeah. Well, I'm with you guys, and let's shift gears because I know we've spent a lot of time on LinkedIn, and I don't want to get away from it, but I don't want it to solely be about LinkedIn, although it really is. 80% of what I think we all do is directly through that medium.
Yeah.
But may I ask, are you guys, Andy, I've seen some of your posts on Instagram, Facebook. Are there any other platforms that are actually fruitful from a business perspective, or is LinkedIn where it's at? Andy, I'll start with you since I know you use Instagram
great.
as well.
Yeah, I think you're starting to see more advisors and agencies on Instagram. It's slow. It's nothing near LinkedIn. And if you just kind of break it down, Instagram's maybe more of the personal stuff. LinkedIn's more of the business stuff, right? Where I still share personal stuff on LinkedIn, but Facebook's the one that's interesting. I will admit I'm not the biggest fan of Facebook, but here's the deal. I get a lot of advisors who reach out that are in the small group business, individual, or even Medicare business. And I'm like, if you sell Medicare, guess what the number one age group is on Facebook? It's 55 to 70-year-olds.
Yeah.
Why they're looking at pictures of their grandkids? Why are you should be spending ad money out there
Yep.
on Facebook about what you do with Medicare, because you're going to hit the people who are on that platform all day long.
Yes.
So for the right niche in our industry, Facebook can still be very valuable.
What about you, Megan?
Yeah, I actually wrote the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So ditto.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I love when we're on the same page. But yes, so I would say in past lives where I had, maybe resources are structured differently, post everywhere, invest everywhere. Today, I would say for advisors that are lean and mean or just starting, post everywhere, grow somewhere.
Yeah. Okay.
And
I like that.
Yeah, and so that's been our strategy, and it is LinkedIn because it is the platform for a B2B transaction, and there's so much you can do with LinkedIn directly to metrics and lead generation. You can create events, you can pimp out your profile, the tagging aspect of it. So I definitely I definitely recommend LinkedIn as your main, and don't sleep on Facebook.
Okay.
So I think LinkedIn is your organic lead gen. It's very expensive to advertise there, so I don't actually recommend it. It's actually hard to build the campaigns. I think it's confusing. But LinkedIn ads, marketing to CEOs, HR, influencers, LinkedIn is now 40 and up.
Okay.
Instagram.
Is that why I'm gravitating towards it? Because I'm going to be 40 next year. Like, I feel like I don't like any other platform. Even Instagram, I don't even really post there. But for whatever reason, and maybe Andy, some of it, your encouragement, like that medium has just been the perfect marriage of age group, the people that are built in terms of an audience. That platform has just been tailor made to what we do. And so I like the idea what you said, post everywhere, grow somewhere.
Yeah.
I kind of just did both in one place because I don't foresee Facebook generating for me leads who want to talk about plan site. Instagram, I think that the audience is younger. Certainly not TikTok. I don't think anybody on TikTok's going to come to plan site, but maybe I'm wrong. But I felt like once I really went deep on LinkedIn and once I just bought into it and just went all in, that's when I start to see a really quick sort of snowball's effect of consistency and engagement. So maybe I'm missing the mark here, and we should be talking mostly about LinkedIn, but I do believe there is room for some of these other platforms as well, but they're probably more in the personal aspect necessarily than the professional.
Yeah. Or tailoring content for different platforms. I think as an industry, when we talk about marketing, everyone wants to talk about it and they're excited, and everyone's eyes always, perk up and their eyebrows raise. You know it, Andy. Everyone wants to talk about marketing, but in terms of like practicality and putting it into practice, few and far between actually do it.
Okay.
So like if 2022 is the year that you want to start, commit to growing somewhere, and LinkedIn. I mean, that's it.
I'm with you. I'm with you. Anything you want to add, Andy, before we shift gears?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
To what Megan just said, number one, you have to have a marketing plan next year. That's a non-starter. But number two, for every insurance advisor, agency, vendor, partner listening in, Megan, you know this as well as I do. If you focus on the looks of your marketing, but your message is terrible, you're not getting asked to the dance. And I think a lot of folks in our industry, when they think marketing, they think pretty slicks, pretty collateral, pretty websites. You focus on what you're saying. Mm-hmm. That's where the marketing has to start.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I want to add something to that, and then I'll kind of shift us gears. You mentioned earlier doing some personal posting, Andy, and I've been playing around with personal, professional, and a mix of those. But I can tell you far and away, like not even close, the personal posts by far get the best engagement. But the personal posts, and every time I post in a personal manner, I focus so heavily around the message I want to deliver. I spend so much time writing, rewriting, curating, positioning it, thinking about, well, if I do include a picture, what supports the message I want to convey? And a lot of it is kind of value structure and family and things like that. But my God, the engagement is off the charts on those things. And that's why I even had a question the other day. I posted a video. I was like, should you be posting personally? Or some people are averse to this notion of personal on LinkedIn. And I'm like, I completely can dispel that notion right away. I think you're wrong. I think people want that. And I think if this is where professionals are meeting, this is our marketplace in which we all meet each other and talk business. I definitely want to know the people as well. And so I've seen the proof in the pudding that if you focus on that message, Andy, and make the message as strong as possible, then the engagement level is exponential versus just a bland kind of generic type post. So that's kind of, I wanted to just support what you're thinking, Andy. And the other thing I want to say is like, I'm sitting at the table. I'm listening to this right now. I'm not using social. I know I need to. One of the first questions that if anybody ever sees what I do and comes to me and asks, well, how do you get ideas or where do you start? So let's start with that question. Megan, I'll position it to you and then I'll tee it up to Andy. Where do your ideas for your posts come from? That's just a very basic question, but it's an important question to ask.
Yeah. So before I talk about like my philosophy, I want to put it in the perspective of a broker or an advisor. Mm-hmm. You create content around pain points. Like that is historical marketing that an advisor would do in email marketing or even traditional advertising years ago. Like, what is someone's pain? What are they struggling with? What are their challenges? And so I think if you can reflect that in your content, start thinking about what is a C-suite struggling with when it comes to benefits, personally and for their business. What's keeping them up at night? Let me talk about how they can combat that. Or let me talk about my perspective or how my clients are overcoming those challenges. So I would say sit down. You have to have a content calendar, but like just start bulleting what is really a big pain point.
Well, do you go even personal pain point if you put yourself in their shoes? If you haven't been in their shoes directly, what would they be worried about? But I'm sure if you have, then you can go, I know what I've struggled with in your shoes. I mean, like, I can't tell you how like much credibility that builds immediately. It's like, I've been there. I've gone through this. Yeah. I know you're struggling with this. You're coming from a position of authority when you take that angle. I mean, so yes. Do you bring some of that in as well when you're posting like that? Okay.
Yeah. And for myself, I balance between representing my brand and my company and then also representing myself as a professional. Mm-hmm. And that is a fine line.
It is.
So sometimes I get inspired truly by my mood. I was super unmotivated recently. And not because I don't love my job. I love my job. But you have days where you wake up and you're like, okay. Yeah. Like it takes a lot. And I posted about my grandmother. And I was old picture of her that my dad had sent me a couple weeks ago. Super glamorous. She was, everything. But her story, I mean, the way she raised kids, she worked, and she took so much pride in working, and it was a privilege. And I thought about that. Mm-hmm. And I was like, she didn't have to work, she got to work. Yeah. And so it's almost like therapeutic.
Yeah.
When you almost post for what's going on with yourself, you get the best engagement. Mm-hmm. So that's some food for thought.
Thank you for sharing that, by the way. I totally feel you there. Andy, what can we weigh in from your perspective? You're in Colorado, so I can make a joke of where your inspiration comes from, but I know that's not the case. So where do you get your ideas for content, man?
I'm not sure what you're talking about.
Yeah, no idea.
So weird.
Sorry, it went over your head. I apologize.
What Megan said was spot on. I think if you're stuck on where you're posting, what you should say, first you have to remember, I think there's people who are holding on to the past and saying, well, LinkedIn's for business only. Mm-hmm. Remember, it started as a recruiting tool, right?
Yeah.
But I remember Gary Vaynerchuk, for those who don't know who this is, said, LinkedIn acts today like Facebook did in 2015. And it's okay to share personal stuff, but do it the way you do it, Spencer, right? Share messages, business life message lessons that come along with your personal journey. So I'll give you a great example. I'll often share posts, I'm cycling out in the foothills here, but I'll talk about a business lesson of when I cycle on the foothills and I'm climbing, I got to stay consistent. I got to go slow. Well, there's a business message there, right? Those are the posts 100% of the time that get a broker to reach out and say, hey, let's connect. Let's talk about what you could do to help me, because I posted something maybe they have a passion for, cycling. It was a life lesson that really connected with them. Mm-hmm. And so when you think about what I should say, take some of the most monotonous things that happen in your everyday life and talk about it.
Yeah.
Because everybody else is going through it. And I think what changed everything is the pandemic, because we all went through the same thing. We're all still going through it.
Yeah.
Even that CEO you're kind of afraid to get in front of, he or she's going through the same thing you are. So if you can share parts of your life that teach really good business and life lessons, I'm guaranteeing he or she is going through that same thing right now too. And now you two are closer than you realize. And so that's where I start. I tell advisors, Megan brought up consistency. Even if it's once a week right now, just start once a week. And if you just go back and forth between, call it subject matter expertise, Megan, you talk about the CEO, CFO, HR director's pain points, mix it with some personal messages.
Yeah.
That's a powerful 1-2 combination, because you're teaching them, but they're also getting to know you.
Yes.
And so when you get that opportunity to get that meeting with them, guess who has the leg up on the competition? You do, because they already know you.
Yeah. Andy paints a picture. And I think it's that concept of storytelling that a lot of people, they're like, what do you mean storytelling? No, you don't have to sit and tell stories. You're painting a picture. You're taking them through a journey that I think is powerful in content creation on LinkedIn. And Andy does it very well.
Well, you definitely don't want to start your post with "once upon a time in a land far, far away." Right? Like you're not telling that
diary.
Dear diary.
with you in front of a campfire. Yeah. But here's a great example. Megan, you just hit it on the head. It's the storytelling. There's not a person that doesn't like talking about themselves. Let's be honest. Like we all in some way, shape, or form love when we get to tell our story a little bit.
Yeah.
And it's actually, you said the word therapeutic, Megan. Imagine that you could actually prospect that way.
You can.
Just be yourself, tell your story, have it resonate with the people you want to do business with, and eventually they're going to come to you.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really what it is. Spencer, you might be the best living case study of this. What has been your specialty for the past few years? Stop loss.
Stop loss, yeah.
How sexy is stop loss?
Not.
I know
very.
you might think it's really sexy.
I try to make it
at
sexy,
the end of the,
but yeah.
At the end of the day, it's not. It's a very boring topic.
Is, yeah.
You have made it fun.
100.
Thank you.
Through your podcast, through your videos.
Yeah.
That's how you build a brand.
Well, it's funny, and I just latched onto the thing I knew, right? Like, I mean, like you said, it wasn't sexy, Andy. I didn't pick, personal finance. I didn't make 7 best ways to make passive income so you can live off the things that you might see on YouTube do really well. I go, well, I know this thing really well. What if there's some other people that actually are interested in it? And it was really just an accident. But we talk about where do your ideas come from. I saw a post one time that said, everything I do is for the 17-year-old version of myself.
Oh, wow.
I love that, because I think the original reason why I started posting about stop loss is because I didn't have, and granted I was a little older when I started, but I didn't have the mentor necessarily teaching me stop loss. I had to go learn it on my own. So the 17-year-old version of myself that maybe wished they'd gotten to stop loss before they were 30, 31 would have loved to have this type of content for themselves. So it's almost like every time I have a video, even a personal life lesson, I'm talking to myself at a younger age and going, well, there's probably some young guys, some young gals going through this early in their career. They might end up finding this interesting, and maybe I'm passing on a little wisdom to the next generation, even though I realize I'm not that old, but there is a next generation behind me that I end up finding a lot of my ideas are coming from that space.
Yeah. Yeah.
Spencer, what you just said is so good, and I want to add on to that.
Please.
When you create content, think about the 17-year-old version of yourself, right? What did I not know back then that I wish I did? Mm-hmm. But when you get stuck on or hesitant to actually do it, think about fast forward and go, what is going to make the 50 or 60-year-old version of me proud today?
Love it.
Because if you're holding back right now, you're hesitating and it's keeping you from building a business you know you're capable of. Think about the person you're going to be in 20, 30 years and what is going to make them proud. Do it today.
Yeah. But before we switch gears, something I love that, Andy.
Too. Yeah.
Something just came to my mind because I think still advisors are very afraid to even to put that out there, right? I think if you talk about something that you're passionate about, it's very easy to create content.
Yeah.
So I want to shout out to Ben Connor. Andy, you know him, we love him. He's such a good person. And I know that because of what he posts. He talks about, he's passionate about leadership. He's passionate about servant leadership. He's passionate about his employees. And so by him posting that, a CEO looks and says, that's somebody I want to do business with. Mm-hmm. He has purpose, he has passion. I trust him. And so not to, just brag on Ben, but I think it's a good example of how an advisor can get personal without getting too deep or feeling like they have to, be super vulnerable and expose themselves.
Well, there's a line that you toe, and go ahead, Andy. Sorry, now I'm getting excited.
And when I get excited, I get animated here.
Yeah.
But to that point, now let's flip that for a second, because I want this to be hyper tactical too.
Yeah.
Megan, you just talked about what Ben does so well, right? Now, the number one mistake almost every advisor, many of them are our peers, make on LinkedIn is they think that CEO's problem is that the healthcare system sucks. Yeah. That's not their problem. So if you're going to post constantly about this healthcare system screwed this person over and this carrier screwed this, that is not resonating with your prospects. Yeah. That's not their problem. So I wanted to share that because Ben does such a good job of getting the CEO to go, that's a human I want to work with. Yeah. Posting constantly about the ills of the insurance and healthcare system does not attract people to you. I'm just going to be honest.
Well, there's a lot of copycat syndrome, I think, and like people kind of rally around that. And I believe having a message, and if that's how you want to interweave for your brand, there is a way to do it that's not as brute as a lot of people do. So I think that's a great point, Andy. I think you don't have to jump on that bandwagon too. I think a lot of people are riding it. And that's not always the best approach for your market and for your own, authenticity.
Well, if you're only hammering the pain, and you're never offering a solution, you're just going, this really sucks, doesn't it?
Right.
Yeah, it does. Now what? Yeah, now what? It really does suck. So let's actually put forth a roadmap. If you guys will help me do this, we've talked, throughout the 45 or so minutes around this, but let's talk about a roadmap. Advisor listening to this wants to actually put this in motion in 2022. Give me 3-5 bullet points, must-haves. What should they be doing? I'll start, Andy. I go to you first, Megan. I'll start with Andy and have you comment on his. So what are the top 3 or 5 things, Andy, they should be doing tomorrow to lay out that strategy?
Absolutely. And I'm not even going to go with LinkedIn marketing. I'm going to start at the basics. And it's something that is in the Building a Story brand, written by Donald Miller, one of the best books ever written. First thing you got to do is know exactly who your ideal prospect is. I think too many don't know. They're going after everything. So figure out who your ideal prospect is. Ask yourself, who's my favorite client today? Now let's go find some more people like that. Second bullet point is, now you've got to build out their brand identity, which is, what problem do you solve for them? What's your process for solving it? And what's the result that process creates? Once you know those 2 things, my ideal prospect, those 3 questions, now the distribution of that message can begin, which is, am I going to use LinkedIn, webinars, email campaigns, public speaking, my website, podcast? Those are all ways to create exponential awareness, but it has to go in that process. Who are you going after? What are you saying to them? How are you going to distribute it?
Yeah. Okay. Excellent.
Yes.
How about you, Megan?
I echo that. Sales and marketing alignment. So I preach that a lot, but the value of establishing what that looks like for your organization is going to be a game changer for brokers and brands in 2022, because it was for us. So we were able to identify, we would tag our campaigns to the contacts. And what I was able to do was go back and look at all of our opportunities and our closed won opportunities and our renewals. And I could attribute campaigns to that contact. 76% of our closed ones were tagged in 5 or more campaigns.
Okay.
And over 50% of renewals were tagged in campaigns. So what this tells me is, number 1, our marketing's working. But number 2, what campaigns work. So now you know what's working. And like, okay, so now when I'm planning for next year, I know what I don't want to do again, and I know exactly what I want to do again. But how can I make it better? How do I, optimize it?
So there's a consistency message, which I think has come up quite a bit. That's consistency, right? 5 touch points or more led to what, a 76% association? Is that what you said?
Yeah. I mean, and there was an average of 5 to 8 campaign tags. So we could see who registered, who attended. I mean, that's really what we measured was registrants and attendance of our digital events and experiences. So it's hard data. These are people that actually raise their hand to engage with us. And so at some point, these campaigns, were they did marketing directly attribute to the win? No. Our job is to hand it off and let sales qualify it and do their magic. But what we can say is they influenced, the marketing influenced and supported.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and there's no doubt in that mind, right? If it was 5%, you'd be like, oh, what am I doing? But that's the vast majority were won or retained that way, which is amazing, right? Because that's the real proof in the pudding. But I think that comes down to consistency, right? Whether you're showing up consistently on posting, whether you're showing up and consistently with drip campaigns or incorporating folks into this funnel or this pipeline of different opportunities they have to engage with WellNet. Regardless, consistency. Because if you did it once and then you forgot about that prospect, well, they probably forgot about you too.
Or start marketing more to those folks that are engaging, and focus on them for more of a close win in that group this year. Don't worry about the people. I say this often. Don't worry about those that aren't opening. You'll get to them later. You've got time. But start tracking the people that are interested in raising their hand. And then the second thing I would say for 2022 is when you're planning out your webinars and you're planning out your speaking engagement and you've got that balance, a webinar is not a sales presentation. And long gone are those days. Long gone are those days of, I'm calling it a webinar. I'm going to tell you how great stop loss is and why you should work with us. So you have to find ways to create immersive experiences. We did a self-funded Shark Tank. And we basically pitched to a willing CEO on just what is out there for alternative funding. And we did our pitch, and we allowed brokers to be a fly on the wall. So not only could they sharpen their own skills, but they could hear directly how a CEO was responding. And this was one of our most successful campaigns.
I just hearing about it, I'm drooling over that. It's amazing.
But so even if you do one thing like that in 2022, you can put energy into creating an experience that is different, do it right, execute, have a follow through, and that's my takeaway for 2022. Do more with less.
Do more with less.
Yeah.
You want to color commentary, Andy, on top of that?
I actually wanted to ask Megan a question because she does such a good job describing this. Megan, a lot of the agencies out there that we both know run email campaigns, but they fall flat.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of it has to do with this spray and pray tactic, right? This week it's this message. Well, that didn't work. Next week, could you just give a couple bullet points for an agency on how to run an effective campaign?
Yeah. The best thing to do is to get more out of your campaign. So if you're just emailing, that's not enough. You can take that same email message, create a social graphic, create a social video, create assets specifically for social that reinforce everything you're doing in your email campaigns. And you have to look at the data. You have to look at opens. You have to look at click-throughs to then reassess how you message your second and your third, your emails. So again, doing more with less. Do not just send out an email. You can send out a bunch of emails at a frequency and then walk away. And so it's basically being more intentional with your email marketing to do more for you, to get more mileage out of it.
Yeah, I think that's great. And so what about now that we've touched on this and, people keep hearing about the war on talent and a great resignation. And Andy, you mentioned kind of how we've all had to shift to more virtual over the last year and a half or so. What about shifting of the messaging or, what have you seen in terms of shifting of what actually works? What should I get rid of? What's not working? And more smiling and dialing, Andy. What other things should we be getting rid of? Because those are old, outdated ways to market versus what can we keep? What should we employ more of using moving forward? So Megan, I'll start with you and I'll let Andy add on top of that this time.
I think when you have these big things happening in the industry, it creates a lot of dialogue, and it gives you an opportunity to create content. So I think reinforcing what's happening and then talking about ways to solve, ways to improve, makes benefits relevant, brings it to the forefront of the conversation, and how your solution can solve the war on talent, the Great Resignation. I think these are buzzwords that CEOs have to lean into because their decision makers, their influencers in their circle are talking about it.
Yeah.
So I say embrace what's happening and make yourself a part of the conversation. And that's your content creation. Now create content, ebooks, digital experiences that are around some of these big major things happening.
These big cultural
Yes.
things that are impacting the entire world. I mean, I think it's useful, and especially you talked about looking up to the CEO. Like part of their job is to provide assurance to their employee base that we're going to get through this. Things are going to be okay. I'm listening to you. I understand the challenges, and here's what we're going to do. They're the general, right? That they're marching their army through a battle. So that, I mean, I think if you take that approach and just know that if you're in that position, obviously people are looking to you, going, "What do we do? How do we get through this?" And so knowing that you should be leaning into those type of conversations rather than necessarily avoiding them, I think is going to be useful. What do you think, Andy? What do you, how are we shifting after the last couple of years of going forward in marketing?
I think lean more into what they want to hear and less into what you want to talk about.
Ooh.
And to Megan's point, I remember asking Steve Watson, okay, Steve, you're a CFO. If I were to do a series of webinars, what would attract you to want to attend the webinars? And he said, well, I can tell you what wouldn't. A bunch of webinars about health insurance.
Yeah.
He said, but talk to me about what's going on in my world today, bringing people back from the virtual world, work from home, the Great Resignation, taxes, the future tax rules. I am all over those. So I think one of the things agencies have to shift towards is, again, long-term thinking. You got to get rid of this short-term mentality. But what content can we bring to our prospects that's actually valuable in their world versus what we talk about every day?
Well said, Andy.
It's the whole philosophy of hosting the party. You're hosting the party for them, which is bringing value to them. You're going to get the credit for that value. Yeah. Even though it might not be your subject of expertise, you're still going to get the credit or the end of the road reward because you're bringing value to them.
Andy, you just exposed my entire tactic with this podcast is let the other people be the experts, and I just get to be a fly on the wall, but I'm the host of the podcast, right? And you're shaking you're dismissing, like, don't worry about it, but it is true.
No, I'm shaking my head. Here's why. Whether it's Megan, whether it's you, whether it's me, I laugh when I get advisors that come to me and want to know, like, they want me to tell them everything, how to do it. And I'm like, are you kidding me? I'm literally doing everything I teach. I am giving you a live case study on how to do it right now. Mm-hmm. You hosting a podcast, Spencer, is letting Megan talk about herself, letting me talk about myself, and letting us look like the heroes, right?
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, who is really getting the biggest value out of it? It's Spencer, because people know Spencer's the host of this podcast.
And that's fair, right? And yeah. It was tongue in cheek, but it's also like the beauty of this medium. And Andy, you've experienced it. Megan, you've experienced this. I get to talk to great people that know their area of expertise, exponentially better than I can ever understand it. But for an hour at a time, you get to talk about it. I get to lean onto you. I get to ask you guys questions. I get to listen. I get to learn. The audience gets to as well. I'm associated with the conversation, of course, facilitating it. But I'm also like, this is selfishly, when I talk about that, do the things for the 17-year-old version of yourself. This is selfishly for educating me. I'm going to take things from this podcast. I'm going to execute some of the things that you guys described on this podcast. So I'm winning at the same time, like in more ways than one. And so I don't think I should shy away necessarily from saying that either.
No, I think it's brilliant. You also get to align yourself with other experts in the industry on topics that are related. So now if someone wants to come to you as a resource, like, you've got a crew, you've got kind of this band behind you of experts that complement what you sell.
Yeah. And I think it's just taking the step, right? And so let's wrap this up, guys. I know, Megan, we got to get you on a plane. Andy, I know you got places to be as well. It's been almost an hour and it's hard to believe.
I know.
Let's distill this down into the best piece of advice you can leave somebody. Where do I start? What is that very first step I should be taking as a person listening to this that wants to do this?
Andy, you want to go first?
Megan's buying time.
Great.
She's buying time.
I know she is.
Well, would you like me to weigh in?
No, I do. I do have a really big, important piece of advice. It was actually the subject of my post this morning. Don't give a crap whatever anybody else might say. Don't let anybody else judge what you do, and know that you're probably going to fail at first, and that's absolutely okay. I think those are the three things that hold people back the most from actually putting themselves out there. But you got to remember, when people judge, people compare, you're making them look in the mirror, and they don't like that. Mm-hmm. And so just do it. If there's one thing the pandemic has taught us, I hope, is that you have nothing to lose.
Wow.
Excellent. How about you, Meg?
Yeah.
Got you 90 seconds to think. So what are you thinking?
No, I mean, I think about the memes on like Instagram where it's like the starter pack.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is your starter pack. Do things that make you look like you're everywhere and you're really not doing a lot. So if you commit to 1 or 2 social posts a week, you host 1 or 2 digital events, you're emailing once a month, or you create a newsletter, like it's little efforts everywhere that in the big picture give you that term punching above your weight. I love that. Mm-hmm. But it makes you look and feel like a bigger brand, a bigger personal or professional brand if you're doing the right little bit of the right things.
Yeah. You look ubiquitous. I love that word. You look ubiquitous. What I was going to say, and I used to be that guy, that stupid nerd that had the SAT flashcards, and I love to like learn words. And ubiquitous is one of my favorite words.
Love it.
But what I was going to say, and I think it's kind of in line with both of what you guys are saying, I discovered my perception of social media, unfortunately, what I was engaging with prior to LinkedIn was Twitter. And Twitter is a toxic cesspool, let's be honest, of really terrible people and terrible ideas and people just flaming each other and ruining each other's lives. It's a worse place probably online outside of, in my opinion, TikTok. And nothing against TikTok, just the way that, anyways. But don't think that LinkedIn is anything like these other social media platforms in terms of the way people engage and interact and the way people treat each other. Here on LinkedIn, I can count on one hand the number of times I've had a negative interaction with somebody on LinkedIn, because most people are professional, they're forgiving, they're decent people, it seems like, on here. And if they don't like something, the majority of the time, they're not even going to tell you they don't like it. They'll just ignore it. And so if you have a fear of starting, or if you're like, Andy, you're talking about worried about, well, should I post this, or this is appropriate, or, just I'm scared to do it the first time. I can tell you, I've seen first posts from some people, and I immediately rush to support them because I know we've talked about it. And I'm like, dude, thank you. Or dude, I don't want to say chick. That's demeaning. But my point is like, good job. You did it. Yeah. Like, everybody's going to be supportive for the most part. And if they don't like it or they disagree, most people are going to just move on. So you don't get this immediate negative, toxic feedback that you're going to get elsewhere. And so I think that, to me, eliminates a lot of the fear. Is like, most people are just going to be really nice here. And that's a good thing. That's a supportive environment, in my opinion, to post.
This will be the last thing I'll say. To that point, when you think about posting on social media, the number one mindset shift I think you have to make, I said earlier, I'm not a huge fan of social media. I actually try not to touch it on weekends. But my opinion doesn't matter. If my prospects are there, I have to be there too. And I think a lot of people say, poo-poo, social media. It doesn't matter what you think. If your prospects are there, you need to be there too.
Well, where else can you speak to CEOs, directors of HR, business owners, solopreneurs, as you called it, Andy, or whatever the terminology? Like, you're getting access to billionaires.
Oh my God.
In a way that you can engage them professionally and actually provide them value. Where else in the world can you do something like that but LinkedIn? So maybe we'll just turn this into LinkedIn commercial for 60 minutes.
I think this needs to be like a monthly episode.
I think I like where your head's at, Andy.
I know. I love talking to you guys. This is so fun.
We'll get LinkedIn to sponsor that too, because that's what we're going to talk about most of the time. Yeah. But it's true. Like, I don't think anybody here, it's not like we're being paid to say these things. We're here because we believe it. We've seen it work. We've all seen it collectively work together and be able to boost each other's content and things like that. And so it's an authentic conversation, and it really is working. And so my hope is that we convey that to the listener and that they start deploying some of these tactics themselves. So in that vein, obviously the best way to probably get a hold of you both is LinkedIn, right? But is there any other ways you'd like people that are listening to engage, or should they just send you a message there? Andy, what do you think?
Yeah, connect with me on LinkedIn. connect with me on LinkedIn. And if you connect with me, you're going to instantly get one of the most secret weapons on LinkedIn nobody's using. You get a nice voice message from me thanking you for the connection. And that's the one tool on LinkedIn nobody's using. That voice
100%.
message feature is a game changer.
Yeah, Andy,
Awesome.
I love that you do that. And thank you for reminding me because I don't do it enough.
I forgot about it too,
Yes.
honestly. Yeah.
You want to stand out in your prospect's eyes? Leave a voice message.
Yeah,
Yep.
it's unexpected. Follow me on LinkedIn and then follow the WellNet page, if only to get ideas.
Yeah.
Like I follow competitors. I follow brands that I love because I get inspired. So just follow us. Just,
Well, and
Hang
I
on.
can genuinely tell you, it's good stuff, right? Like it is generally good marketing campaigns, and it's brilliant information. So you're obviously spearheading that, so I'm tooting your horn as well. But seriously, thank you both, Megan. Thank you for traveling in
bet.
again. I hope I am able to provide enough value for you in leaving
course.
this, and I know
Yes.
you tell me that.
Oh my gosh.
Andy as well. I mean, I really appreciate you leaning your expertise and your brand on this podcast. Real quickly, thank you to everybody that's listened. The first, I think, 30. This is episode hopefully 34 or 35. The chapter of this particular podcast studio is closing, but the show will go on, and I'm looking forward to 2022 as well, and hopefully making it bigger and better than ever. So thank you to everybody that's
Awesome.
listening.
and thank you for doing this.
Yes.
My pleasure.
No one is
Keep
doing
the brand building, my friend.
Yeah, and this is a great resource for the industry. And you give back in a way that is really valuable. So
Well,
thank you.
guys. We're all patting each other's backs
Oh,
as
man.
we walk out. But, all right, guys, that's it. That's it for the episode. Thank you all again, and we'll talk to you guys soon. Bye.